Okay, so today we're going to be doing the rear struts on the 2000 Honda Civic. The rear struts on these are basically all the same part numbers, whereas the front ones are usually two different part numbers. So the rears are usually the same on this. I bought FCSs for this. These are FCS 1336315 struts. First side we're going to do is the passenger side. So first thing, we've got the passenger side rear of the car lifted up. And you want to take your liner out of the trunk so you can get to where the struts are, right here. So it'll look like that. And they've got little clips and stuff that you pull off. And then when you move it out of the way, they'll be exposed like that. Alright, so now we're going to take that wheel off. And these rims are picky. So some sockets will work with them, some sockets won't. You just have to pay attention to how your rims are. Okay, so we've got a couple bolts to undo. There's the rear upper control arm on the passenger side. We'll be replacing this one. So there's just a giant hole there. We'll have to undo this bolt and these bolts to replace this, but to get the strut off, you'll have to undo this one. And underneath the back, there's one down here. Have to undo those two to get it out, to be able to undo it from the trunk to get it out. Here we go.
There we go.
Now we're ready to go to the top. Okay, now we got both of the bolts loosened and out. Now this whole assembly will flop free, including the upper control arm. And here's your strut, which is loose now. Now we go into the trunk and we undo the nuts on the struts.
Yep, definitely 14. Ready?
Yep.
One. There's two.
There it goes. Excellent. And then you should be able to push down on this and the strut comes loose. There you go. There's the old one. There's our new one.
What's this?
This is what happens when somebody's trying to keep the sag from being as bad. They stuff one of these little spacers. It's like a little bumper thing into the spring as a band-aid. That's interesting part of packaging. They zip tied the nut to the bottom so it wouldn't fall out of the box. So we'll remove the warranty sticker. So we'll set it on the bottom part and then push down on the bottom. Don't be afraid to use your foot to get it in there. And you can line it up. The holes will only line up one way. Here we go. And now it's in. So now that the strut's in, all we'll have to do is we'll have someone hold it up and have someone put the nuts on the top of it, and then that way we can get it lined up so we can put it on the bottom. And if you want to keep your factory size nuts, they're generally the same size, so you can put them back on, and then that way you don't have to bring out any extra tools that are different sizes than what Honda actually uses. One thing that I like to do is before I put these strut bolts back in, is clean them really good, and then take a little bit of, it could be any grease, I just use wheel bearing grease. Take a little bit and put some on that bolt, because this will keep it from seizing up. You could use anti-seize as well, but this is cheaper and it's what I've got around. And if this is what you have around, this will do just as good. So now we gotta get this lined up enough to get the bolt in there, which sometimes taking a old screwdriver or something of that effect works very well for lining it up. Sometimes you'll get lucky. You can just give it a tap. Sometimes it'll line right up. Other times it won't, and it'll be a pain. And you have to wiggle everything around. To get it lined up. So now we'll need the nut that goes on the strut. Now the factory ones had a welded nut on the strut. The aftermarket ones usually do not. So you'll have to use their nut. Or if this completely breaks off when you take the original off, you can replace it with aftermarket bolts. Just make sure you have the right grade. We'll get this on there.
I think they're 15.
Yeah, and they're not a 14. So again, another change in size if you go with aftermarket stuff. I'll have to bust out more tools, or you can switch the nuts to the same size that it originally was. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an adjustable wrench onto the nut, and then I'm going to give the other side with the impact. That nice and tight. You'll want to torque these after they get on the ground. So you generally want to put them in light and then retorque them on the ground. But if you don't have a torque wrench and you're just trying to get to work, this will do just fine. If you don't have an impact, you can put a normal wrench or an adjustable wrench on this side and use a ratchet on the other side and just get it as tight as you can. But after you're done, take the load off of the suspension with the jack and retighten these by hand. Yep.
Start by just getting it snug.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that they're snug, I'm gonna torque them down.
That's good. That's good.
There you go.
Alright. Alright, now we're good to move on to the upper control arm. We're going to get these bolts zipped out, and then we'll get the new one out and take a look at them. Alright. There we go. It's our new part. It's part number SK520672. Okay, now let's look at how these failed. So this one, here's the new one. See, the bushing's nice and solid, doesn't go anywhere. No holes anywhere. And this one, this whole bushing is shot.
Probably just pull it right out.
Yeah, actually, it's just coming right out. It's completely done. There's a hole through it. So it's time for this one to be replaced, and we'll replace it with that one. And you always check your new parts with your old parts, and it looks identical to it. Some of these have a little bit different of a cut to them, like this one's got a big thick wave cut up here. This one's kind of thin. It's just because it's the cheaper side of the spectrum. It won't affect the performance, but it will work the same. So on the passenger side, when you go to put these in on a 96 to 2000, you want the U on the top where it fits in like this, with this big fat part sticking out on the right. So we're going to put these in, thread these in by hand first. So you have to be careful because these threads are in a block that's welded behind the frame. So you don't want to strip those. If there's anything wrong with your bolt, like if it has a weird hourglassing or anything weird with the threads, you'll want to change the bolt. There was nothing wrong with these. What I'm going to do is I'm going to torque them down by hand with a ratchet first. Like so. And then you're supposed to use a torque wrench to torque these. Since this is probably going to be sold, I'm going to take these and just give them a quick bump with the impact. You don't want to hammer down on them because then you might ruin the threads, but that won't hurt it. That's enough just to get it on there. And if you notice, there's not a lot of room here to work with to get these together, so you have to use a jack to lift up on the hub to get it to mate up to each other, because the new strut in there is keeping it from going anywhere. So I'm going to use a light trolley jack just to lift up on the hub. Let's see, I'm not here to be good. And you can see it getting closer to where it needs to be. So you get it lined up with where the control arm is. And you can generally bump it down to where you have good room to play with. And again, like with this, you want to take this bolt and put some grease or anti-seize on it to keep it from seizing up. Alright, and now we can just sneak the bolt on through. Thread it in. Perfect. And now it's together. And now I want to go back over by hand. Just make sure all of those bolts are tight. So this side's ready to button up, and then we'll get to work on the other side. And that is how much higher that raised just off of putting a new strut in. So there's an idea of how you can tell you've got dead struts.
We have to measure, because don't you have a video of it before?
Oh yeah, it's about that far. I can stand my hand all the way up compared to before. It was like right there. Granted, this will sink down a little bit about this far after it's settled overnight, but this is a lot better than it was. Oh man, come in and get that.
Come on.
Look up in here.
Oh my.
Yeah, the dust boots actually, like all bent up.
I mean, the other one I don't think had a dust boot.
Maybe not. Which this upper control arm is pretty rough too. I've got a spare that I can replace that one with that still has some life left in it, because this one looks pretty bad too. this one looks rough. Okay, so in this situation, when you get a bolt that's corroded that will not come out, you can let the weight off of the hub and it should come out pretty easy. There it went. Notice on this bolt, it's not only rusted and corroded, but from here to here, the threads are squashed. So this happens a lot of times when it gets nice and seized up in there. Then when you gotta take it out, those threads get all squished. So we'll go dig and find a replacement for that when it comes time to putting one back in. We'll not be reusing that one. And that one was fine. Needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but it's good. Let's shoot this with some WD-40 because these look a little bit rustier. And this one's shot too.
Probably push it right out the other side.
Yeah, if you hit it with a hammer, it'd probably pop right out. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we'll want to replace that. Yep, it's good. There we go. Rubber spacers on this because it was so dead that
Okay,
it was
probably press that with your hand.
It was probably, yeah. It was probably hitting tire at one point, and they put these in to keep it from bottoming out. Here's the new versus the old. There we go.
These bolts should go on really easy with zero resistance until you get down to at least finger tight.
Yeah.
That's pretty important.
Okay, so now before I do anything else, I've got to source a rear control arm and get a new bolt for the bottom of the strut. Okay, so we found a replacement. It's probably a quarter Civic bolt, but it's the exact same as the other ones. Just a little bit shorter, but that's okay. There it is. Now we got it. Alright, that's in there. I'll put the nut on the other side. Alright, that's good. Now we've got another control arm. It's used, but it'll work. It's still got plenty of life left. The bushings aren't dead. It's solid. So we'll be using this one. This is actually one left over from when we did Spectre's rear upper control arms, and we replaced them with performance parts. Alright, that'll be good. Alright. Got our bolt greased up, got it lined up, and I went right in there. Sure, get the thread started. There it is. Okay, so we had to replace the lower bolt, and this bolt was reusable, and we used a used upper control arm to put on the top because the old one was terrible condition. So I had a used one laying around that was in much better shape, so that went on there. New strut, everything's buttoned up, and we're about to drop it and see how much clearance we just gained. There we go. All the clearance. How much higher the back is compared to the front. Back is much higher now. Okay, so that is how you do the rear struts on a 96 to 2000 Honda Civic. This one will be getting the front struts next time we go to work on it. Right now we've gained so much ground clearance on the back of it. There's no give. The front's way, the back is way higher than the front right now. So it definitely needed that, as we can see from the old parts. So yeah, on the next video we'll be doing the front strut.